This week we check out the mighty Mustang and its incredible conception. We also look at a plane that may provide the holy grail for civil aviation. And we'll investigate man's dream to fill the sky with flying wings. Perhaps it's the combination of styling and sound that make these planes a favourite at air shows. The Mustang had similar statistics as the Spitfire. A little over 15,000 p51 Mustangs were produced during World War II. The English version had 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns. The main difference was the ability of the Mustang to fly long distances, and that is where the Mustang shone. The Mustang was designed and built by a company called North American. The workshops were, for the time, state-of-the-art. The prototype was concepted and constructed in 122 days. The production of one of the world's finest aircraft came about in an interesting way. During 1939, the British approached the Americans. They needed a fighter plane. They had already approached Curtiss, but they could not deliver as they were in full production with the P-40. The British wanted North American to build P-40s under license. Dutch Kindleberger, the CEO of North American, suggested they could build a new improved aircraft using the Allison power plant from the P-40. Overnight, Kindleberger's design team came up with a sleek new fighter plan, and the British gave the go-ahead to proceed with 320 of the new P-51. The contract required the prototype to be ready within 8 months. North American decided to try for 120 days. North American was 2 days late on their estimate because the engines were 2 days late getting to the North American factory. What is most remarkable about this achievement is that the prototype P-51 was built in the same time that it would take for North American to tool up to construct the P-40. The efficiency of the company enabled them to build 9,000 Mustangs a year. North American went on to produce more planes during World War II than any other American aviation company. This was a remarkable feat, as the P-51 Mustang was the first combat aircraft that North American created from the ground up. The incredibly low fuel consumption gave the Mustang the title of the best long-range fighter bomber of World War II. No longer could Luftwaffe fighters enjoy turkey shoots of Allied bombers. From this point on, the German fighter aircraft were on the defensive. In addition to protecting the bombers at high altitudes, the P-51 Mustangs were given the added assignment of destroying the Luftwaffe aircraft on the ground, along with their support facilities during low-altitude strafing missions. The Mustang's military record is outstanding. Mustangs destroyed 4,950 enemy aircraft in air combat and 4,131 on the ground. During the Second World War, the Mustang flew 213,873 missions in Europe alone. The planes shot down by the Mustang add up to almost half that claimed by the combined American units in the European theatre. It's interesting to note that the Spitfire and the Mustang made such an impact and developed such a following that a few companies have evolved that specialise in manufacturing 2/3 or 3/4 size flying replicas of the planes. The companies duplicate the aircraft in the closest possible way to ensure the plane flies and feels like the original. This is Jimmy Wickham of Australia putting his Chevy-powered Mustang through its paces at a recent air show. Different manufacturers use different power plants. What is interesting is that in certain areas, the replicas actually outperform the original. For example, the Thunder Mustang has a cruising speed of 40 miles per hour, more than the original, and has nearly twice the rate of climb. Over the years, airlines and manufacturers sought to make flight available to the masses, and seat sizing and space per passenger were continually squeezed to make international travel more affordable. In the short history of overseas travel, there are perhaps only 4 or 5 planes that were built that could be considered quantum leaps in the expansion of intercontinental flight. Today, a European company is building an aircraft that will, like yesteryear, offer the passengers space and comfort. The new aircraft can provide this while being substantially cheaper to operate than its competition. A new era in civil aviation is about to be born. It took a huge gamble for Airbus to reverse the trend of less space and tighter seating, and they achieved this with innovation. The weight savings resulting from innovative production allow the A380 to weigh in at around 240 tonnes, which is 10 to 15 tonnes lighter than a similar size aircraft using 747 technology. The construction of the Airbus A380 is equal in commitment, innovation and technology advancement to any civil aircraft program preceding it. Airbus first began studies on a very large 500-seat airliner in the early 1990s. The project's goal is to create a competitor and successor to the Boeing 747 and end Boeing's dominance of the very large airliner market and round out Airbus's product line. The Stratocruiser, Super Constellation and 747 were all huge steps forward for civil aviation. The A380 will be a quantum leap in advancement, and its sheer size already places it in aviation's Hall of Fame. The A380 has about a third more seating and far more available floor space than its closest competitor, the Boeing 747. A380 has an unparalleled level of comfort, with wider seats and aisles, open spaces for passengers to stretch their legs, and access to the lower deck amenities, which may contain sleeper cabins, crew rest areas, business centres, gymnasiums, duty-free shops, or even a creche. The A380 achieves this with a 10 to 15% lower per seat operating cost than a 747. In fact, A380s consume less than 3 litres of fuel per passenger over 100 kilometres. Current tests and data indicate that Airbus may very well have achieved the holy grail of commercial aviation with the A380. The prime image most of us have of aircraft that fly successfully is a form that comprises of fuselage, tail assembly and a set of wings. However, this is not the only profile that can take to the skies and soars gracefully and indeed higher and faster than the very animal that first inspired flight, the bird. Flight has always been about inspiration, However, the early inventors had very little knowledge or information regarding the technicalities or constitution of flight. The evolution process started with trial and error. The early pioneers simply built things they thought should fly. The contraptions that showed promise were further refined, and the failures often destroyed themselves and the pilot. Designers were at times lost for direction, as craft that shouldn't have flown actually did, and other craft that should have flown didn't. Over the years, designers have created flying examples of craft that have done away with all the features that we would consider crucial to flight. Planes without tails, planes without a fuselage, and planes without even the most fundamental aspect of flight: wings. An early aviation pioneer spent more than 3 decades developing this radical-looking craft: the flying wing. Jack Northrop was convinced that a craft that had no turbulence from a fuselage and designed in a manner that the whole aircraft's surface area supplied lift would revolutionise air travel. His dream was to see the skies filled with economical flying wings. Surprisingly, Northrop was not a pilot. During December 1941, Northrop provided a test flight of a flying wing. The American Defence Force immediately saw merit in Northrop's design and concepts, and in 1942 granted him a contract to build the next prototype, the XB-35. The contract required a flying wing with a range of 6,000 miles and a top speed of 450 miles per hour. The operational height was to be 45,000 feet. In June 1946, 3 years late and massively over budget, the first XB-35 was prepared for its test flights. Problems were occurring. The drive shaft had vibrations and the prop feathering mechanism was not performing satisfactorily. However, the jet age had dawned, so the decision was made to transform the XB-35 into the XB-49 jet-powered flying wing. But it also had shortcomings. Some argue that the final blow to the flying wing was that in the jet form the craft was not capable of delivering an atomic weapon. Sometimes an idea is ahead of its time. The technology is just not there to be able to achieve the desired result. But the wing did something exceptional that went very unnoticed for some time. The wing had stealth capability. It is suggested that during flight tests of the wings, technicians were often frustrated because the tracking radar frequently went on the bleep, and they often lost the flying wing from radar visual. Apparently, such incident reports were filed away and forgotten, or were they? Interestingly, the B-2 was developed and built by Jack Northrop's old company. However, Jack Northrop was not one of the few that had security clearance for the knowledge regarding the top-secret B-2. The blending of low observable technologies with high aerodynamic efficiency and large payloads gives the B-2 important advantages over existing bombers. Its unrefueled range is surprisingly similar to the initial contract given to Northrop during the early wing development, approximately 6,000 miles. In retrospect, one would have to wonder how much of Jack Northrop's research was pulled from the filing cabinet and reviewed when engineers began work on the B-2. In 1959, the US military awarded North American Aviation a contract to build the Valkyrie. North American beat another aviation giant, Boeing, to this most prestigious project. The project's goal seemed overpowering. North American was to construct the largest and fastest aircraft ever built. The Valkyrie was to be able to sustain and cruise at Mach 3, which is 3 times the speed of sound and faster than a bullet. It wasn't until nearly 5 years later, on May the 11th, 1964, that the public saw the Valkyrie. Three XB-70s were built in the original agreement, but only 2 were completed. Each was to be an improved version. The first XB-70 was engineered entirely from wind tunnel tests and computer-generated models. This is prototype 2, on June the 8th, 1966, about to perform a simple flight plan. It involved a couple of passes over recording instruments at a speed of Mach 1.4. After that, at the request of General Electric, a flight in formation with 4 other GE-powered aircraft was arranged. They were to fly in close configuration for photographers to film publicity pictures from an accompanying Learjet. After 45 minutes, the shoot was finished and the planes broke formation. Disaster struck. The F-104 collided with the Valkyrie. The complex airflow surrounding the XB-70 lifted the F-104 over its back and spun the Starfighter 180 degrees. It collided with both the Valkyrie's vertical stabilizers. It also damaged the left wingtip before falling away in flames. At this point, the F-104 pilot and one of America's greatest test pilots, Joe Walker, was dead. 16 seconds after the impact, the XB-70 started a slight roll and continued through 2 slow rolls. Then the plane went into a spin and the hope of recovery was lost. Al White managed to eject just in time, but his co-pilot Carl Cross was lost in the Valkyrie. The chutes of White's pod deployed. However, the airbag underneath the pod, which was designed to absorb the shock of the impact, had failed to inflate. White's body sustained a 33G shock. Miraculously, although battered and bruised, he didn't suffer one broken bone. White was rated flight status just 3 months later, but he never flew the XB-70 again. Within a time frame of just 76 seconds, 2 brave and great men and one of the most outstanding planes ever built were gone. The loss of the test pilot and plane is not as unusual as one might think. Many pilots have given their lives while flying untested machines. Although he wasn't a test pilot on the Valkyrie project, Bob Hoover was one of North America's most famous test pilots. In over 50 years of flying, Bob Hoover has flown in more varied aircraft, in more countries, and before more spectators than any other pilot in the history of aviation. This is Bob Hoover flying before a small audience in the remote Australian state of Tasmania. According to the Continental Edition, March 2003, of Air and Space Smithsonian, Bob Hoover was named the 3rd greatest aviator in history. Other famous aviators describe Bob Hoover as the very best stick and rudder pilot to take to the skies. During World War II, Bob's Spitfire was shot down over the Mediterranean. He was captured and spent 16 months as a POW. He managed to escape and commandeered a German Fokker-Wulf 190, which he flew to Holland. Bob has been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross Soldier's Medal for Valour, Air Medal with clusters and a Purple Heart. In 1950, Hoover was hired by North American Aviation to do experimental flight testing on many of their aircraft, including the F-100 Super Sabre. When he finished with North America, Bob went on to the airshow circuit with a Shriek Commander. Here's Bob demonstrating his famous routine of flying the Commander through a loop, then continuing with an 8-point roll, and finally landing the aircraft. This is all done with the engines off. Bob keeps the plane in the air for about 3 minutes without power. To a non-aviator, this looks easy. In reality, Bob's routine can only be described as an amazing demonstration of energy management. Bob Hoover, although rated as one of the best, is really only one of many brave pilots that have tested the untested. Surprisingly, many people may not be aware of the benefits that we enjoy today as a result of test pilots. Much technology has been gained by our strides in aviation, and much of this has filtered into our day-to-day lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, is that a piece of flying or what? Ladies and gentlemen, bring him out of the airplane, please, would you? The great Mr. Robert A. Bob Hoover.
Gordon, thank you. Thank you all so very much.